Hola todos! It is leadership time. Woo, woo. We're all cheering. Woo! It's like the World Cup. Woo, woo, woo. Okay, we have 3 articles here, and I already did my leadership intro in the last video. So I'm going to jump right in. We have 4 pages of pretty solid questions here. So let's go with Team IBM, CEO Ramati. There are many workers that still need to work in traditional hierarchical structures. How can these employees be empowered while also pushing leadership throughout the organization? So I think the question you're asking here is, many companies are still hierarchical. How do you empower employees when we're still in a hierarchical like corporation? Not easy. Because in true hierarchies, the boss tells you what to do. Hierarchies tend to be more X than Y. That's the challenge. So what you can do is whenever work is sent your way, you go over and above, do 110%, get noticed to see if you can push yourself up the food chain. Because if you push yourself up the food chain, then you make changes from above. It's hard to make changes from below in a Theory X steep hierarchical type firm. The article mentions the company wants confident people, but not so confident that it breeds self-centeredness or hubris. Humility is basically what we're trying to get at. How companies distinguish between these 2 different types of people. Is it realistic for a company to know who confident people are, but not self-centered or hubris? Well, yeah, we can explore this. We can have very one-on-one type relationships with our employees. We can find out people who have confidence to go forward but are not egotistic, right? That's not that hard to uncover. As a matter of fact, you could, you don't have to do an exercise to the extent of what Google did, a somewhat simple personality profile kind of thing. There it is. Hold on. So this is a, $15, $20 book. I'm sure every organization in America can afford something as simple as this and not have to go to the extent that Project Oxygen went to. You can find out strengths, weaknesses, and then from here, you can really find out if someone who is self-centered or has too much hubris or has the confidence and empathy that a company is looking for. All right, Team Facebook, which is a very, very flat organization. Okay, there's a few people up at the top, but Facebook's very flat. And for a company its size, it has very few employees. It's an anomaly, to be honest with you. Size in terms of revenue, by the way. If a company is underperforming, would you say that a lack of trust could be one of the contributing factors? No. There could be multiple reasons why a company is underperforming. A lack of trust could be one of them, but I could think of about 44 million others. I get what the question is asking. If the employees don't trust management or management don't trust the employees, how can you expect a company to perform at peak, optimal, whatever you want to call it? I get that. But remember, a company could be underperforming. It could be a market-oriented company that's underperforming because the competition around it is just unbelievable. Take a company like Puma. It's in a really cutthroat marketplace with Nike and Adidas, and even Under Armour. So, there could be many other things happening besides just this. What do you think impacts employee retention turnover? Intrinsic or extrinsic? It depends on the employee. There is a million studies on this. I actually love turnover studies. It's one of the, if you look at my published articles, I've done salesperson employee turnover studies, and intrinsic, which is self-worth, and intrinsic, which is money, there's usually a bunch of other factors as well. Promotion, your boss, job satisfaction, how your product competes versus others in the marketplace, i.e., are you the number one player in that particular marketplace? It's not an either or. This is a more complex question and a complex answer. Okay? If a matrix-style organization is slow to react, what is the ideal organizational structure to replace it? Ooh, okay. This is Team Google. It's slow to react because matrix organization formations is the most complex. You know, too many people are reporting to too many other people. Now, please excuse me, because here is the professor that is harping on no silos, flat organization, stronger interfirm communication, and you would think a matrix organization would do something like that. But usually what happens is when a top-down forced communication is happening, God, there's so many anti-matrix organization articles out there that it's not even funny. It's sort of like if you do the interfirm communication informally without strict organizational orders, it tends to be more successful than when you do a forced matrix style forced communication. I'm summing up a lot of literature there, but that tends to be what I see. Do you think that other companies will see a shift in the traditional boss and more towards the environment that promotes unbossing? The ability to be more creative without having to worry about making sure your boss approves, and boost creativity and work ethics. All right. This is where I'll say this now. I'm a huge fan of the second article because I really like the continuum that it lays out from extreme theory X to extreme theory Y. Okay? In my head, although there are 6 places on that continuum, only 2 of them are bad. 4 of them are good. Meaning there are more than one leadership style. So how does a company know if they should be more X versus more Y? Well, one of the number one issues of whether you're more X versus more Y, is your company in crisis in any way? Is there a life-threatening 2008 financial meltdown hanging over your head? Okay? This is a situation where Theory X is probably more apt. The more your company is in crisis and turmoil, the more you need relatively strong Theory X style leadership. The less turmoil, issues, competition your company has, the more Theory Y you can be. Theory Y takes more time. Period. Theory Y is more consensus oriented. Theory X is less consensus oriented. Theory X has more stronger centralization in decision making. So I'm personally a fan of more Y, providing we have the time and the marketplace structure, i.e., we are not in a zero-sum game marketplace. Being more X versus Y in a cutthroat industry is probably better than being more X than Y in an industry where there's tons, all tides lift all boats is the expression. If the entire marketplace is in growth mode and everybody's growing, there's no need to have an X. Uber is an ultra X. Travis, who I'm not a fan of, and I'm not a fan of Uber. I wish them well. I hope they can turn that ship around. But when it comes to do some quick searches on Uber, and the internal management practices at Uber are, oh my gosh, I can't condone them. Everything from Extreme X to being horrible to their employees, sexist, Me Too, you name it. If you want to look at ground zero for the Me Too movement in Silicon Valley, start at Uber. Okay? So Uber is a company in crisis right now. They need a stronger individual there. But the industry itself is not. They didn't need to go as X as they did when they really didn't have major competition. I'm going to keep coming back to this theme because many of the questions ask the same thing in different ways. As a leader, do you still need to be able to switch to the type of leadership role to take? Okay. I think the second article and those leadership positions are leadership roles, and these are just examples to describe different styles of leadership. Okay? So I wouldn't call these leadership roles. No. These are only descriptors to describe X versus Y. One company or team may require use of power and fear occasionally. Oh, by the way, I'm never fear, and most leaders don't need power. Consensus over power every day of the week in my eyes. Until good change has been made, and then a leader could switch back to an enlightened leader. Well, if you use power and fear, okay, how's anybody ever going to trust you when you decide to switch back as an enlightened leader? You can be strong without using fear. You can be strong without using power. Does this hold true? Every manager is a leader, yet every leader doesn't require being a manager. How about I say it this way? Every employee is a leader, yet every employee doesn't need to be a manager. I would more agree with that. Because if you are a manager and you have people under you, leader, followers, by definition, you're a leader. So the second half of this phrase doesn't work for me. Okay, Team Microsoft. Is it the best to determine the strengths and weaknesses of an employer prior to delegating authority? Maybe. I don't know you necessarily have to. Look, even the best leaders in the world, MLK, Gandhi, they had weaknesses. Everyone has weaknesses. So, no. You're probably making the decision more on their strengths and more on their skill sets. How can a business foster both managerial and leadership styles without compromising the vision of the business? How can a business foster both managerial and leadership styles without compromising? Whoa. Okay. Whoever asked this question, I want to refer back to that other conversation. You don't have to compromise anything. You are who you are as a leader. Okay? And it is your role. Perhaps you are more Y. You are more X. But I don't know how that compromises anything. Yeah, I'm trying to see. How can businesses foster both managerial and leadership styles without compromising the vision? Okay. I think you're trying to say that both managerial and leadership are different things. And I don't think they are. Matter of fact, my leadership style, my managerial style, to me, that's two ways of saying the same exact thing. Okay? So, the vision of the organization, Seton Hall, is servant leadership by definition. So, we, in many of the areas of the Stillman School of Business, we have servant leaders by definition. It is our management style. So, are you trying to say that a Theory X person would compromise the mission of the... Well, you can still be more theory X. Look at the positions on that continuum. You can be in the center of the continuum, which is a little bit more X than Y, but still be a servant leader. You know. How can a company train its managers or bosses to change their constantly bad habits and adapt the factors identified in the article to become leaders? I think the Google article does this best. You know, if you have employees under you saying how you behave, and then if you have employees going company-wide saying this is how the managers that we like the best behave, then if you can't do that, then guess what? You don't get to stay a manager. Hopefully you get to keep your job, but... Alright, Team Amazon, which, oh my god. Oh my gosh, does Amazon... If you guys are looking for a book to read... Hold on, let me hit pause. Alright, Amazon, The Everything Store, Jeff Bezos and the Age of Amazon by Brad Stone. Okay, Brad really skewered Amazon in this book. Amazon is a Theory X organization, and Bezos is an Extreme X, and he's moving towards Y, but he's still very, very X. I have a feeling this went overboard on the X, but oh my god, does this portray Amazon as an ultra, ultra X. If you're looking for a leadership book, this could be a book you could read. Yeah. So, how do firms transition from leadership roles and mindsets to new mindsets? Okay. How did I get to that book, by the way? How can firms transition from traditional leadership roles and mindset to this new mindset in order to unlock their full potential? I think I kind of answered that in this article. You know, it starts with a conversation. It also starts with, you know, the organization must trust the employees and empower employees. If they don't want to empower employees, then forget it. You know. Are the companies and industries where traditional leadership roles better than new non-traditional? No. No. So what do you mean better? Financially better, financially stronger, financially better in terms of Fortune's. Look at Fortune's 100 best places to work. Go find that article. That's an incredible article. And look for evidence of Theory X in that article. And you won't find it very much. Or at all, to be honest with you. Now, in the video, I explicitly talk about Popovich. Popovich is not an extreme Y. Obama is an extreme Y. Popovich is not an extreme Y. Popovich is probably slightly left of center on X. He's very, very, very strong. But he's still a servant leader. So, you know, I need you to define better here. What do you mean by better? You know, I have more questions like this, so I'll keep going. Do you believe that this is Team Netflix? By the way, Hastings is a Y, not an extreme Y, but more Y than not. Do you believe that all organizations can or should have enlightened leaders to share power? No, I do not believe. Do you think that leadership style is dependent on the people you are leading or the structure of the organization? It's not dependent on the structure of the organization. Granted, some structures fit better with certain leadership styles, i.e., if your organization is more X, then you can be more hierarchical. As a matter of fact, by definition, you're gonna flow in that direction. If your organization is more Y, then you better be flatter, because you give the employees more span of control, more empowerment. So, you know. Now, should all organizations have enlightened leaders? I think all organizations should have good leaders. Now, enlightened means Y. Okay? They don't all have to be Ys, but they need to be good. Companies can utilize leadership development programs in various forms with the intention of positioning high potential candidates in areas for increased future development. However, There just often seem to be more exclusive than not. What are your thoughts? There's a couple questions like this here. I'm a fan of leadership development programs. I'm a fan of taking someone out of the day-to-day and having leadership conversations. Because I don't care if we're talking about leadership. I don't care if we're talking about marketing. I don't care if we're talking about finance. If you want to learn more finance, you need to talk more about finance. You want to learn more about digital marketing or inbound marketing, you better do more research on inbound marketing. If you want to learn more about leadership, you better have more leadership education. Okay? Now, many companies do use these to kind of pull managers to a side and say, okay, you are going to be the future of the company. Okay? I tend to think of leadership development programs, I'm a fan of them, but I sure hope they are safe havens where people get to practice. How do you become a good leader? You practice. How do you become a good center forward? You practice. How do you become a good CEO? You practice. And I hope leadership development programs are my son's downstairs playing bass. He's doing lessons, and they're playing a song, and I just got a little twisted there in my head because I heard the song. But heck, hey, if you got a 13-year-old playing Led Zeppelin, you know, okay. But I'm a fan. I hope the leadership programs are there for practice and not just there for early identification and segregation. The article insinuates that everyone is a leader, but the age-old question remains, are leaders born or made? Now, I explicitly talked about this in the other video. They are made, super made. I'm a professor. I'm all about education and teaching. And I just gave you a whole thing about leadership should be developed in practice. Made. With the approach the article takes, it seems that leaders can be made under the right circumstances. Agreed. And low candor is another made. However, do you feel that certain are more inclined to be leaders than others? No. Okay? I think about it this way. You always hear this in baseball. I like baseball. You know, that guy's just a natural born hitter. You know, look at that swing. It's just natural. Okay. Perhaps this kid started swinging at 3 years old. You know, look at Tiger Woods. Okay, when Tiger Woods was in his prime, you know, his father was a professional golfer. You know, he had custom clubs made. The kid was on Johnny Carson as like a 4-year-old hitting putts from 25 yards away. It was practice. Okay, it looked natural because it was natural to him because he practiced. Now, there are some individuals, let's go back to salespeople, which I said in the video. There's some individuals that either have confidence, they're comfortable talking, and they might have a head start. But that doesn't mean they're going to be a better salesperson. There's some individuals that might have a head start with golf, or with baseball, or LeBron did with basketball. You know, LeBron would shoot 10,000 shots a weekend. Okay? That's what LeBron did as a 12-year-old. That's what he did. So, of course he looks like the best player that's ever played the NBA out there on the court. Because that's what he does. Made. LeBron was made. Okay? Alright, next article. I'm a huge fan of this Goleman. Goleman was a Harvard professor. He came up with the emotional intelligence literature. It exploded so much that he was able to leave a very, very high salary at Harvard and quadruple his salary just being a consultant. So, he's doing very well for himself. What makes a leader? Which styles, once implemented together, would create the optimal leadership style? No. There is no one optimal leadership style. I want to set this straight for the record here. I think there are people that are more X and there are people that are more Y, and depending on the situation, do you need to be more X or do you need to be more Y? I'm going to tell you right now that it's very difficult for leaders to switch roles. You know, I tend to be more Y. I'm a lousy X. Obama was not a pretty lousy X. You know, there are some people that are extreme X's and they don't have a Y bone in their body. It's very difficult for leaders to switch gears, but the very, very best leaders know when to be more X and know when to be more Y. So there isn't one optimal leadership style. There is leaders who know the situation and how to act. Which style would be present amidst a successful marketing firm and why? This is a little too general here. I think marketing firms, I'm a bottom-up guy. How can you be X in a bottom-up world? I'm more Y. Most marketing firms are X firms, for the record, by the way. All right, Team Facebook. With today's society, ever-increasing use of mobile devices and electronics, bottom-up world, and their impact on social interactions, bottom-up world, would you say that social skill would become even more scarce leadership quality possessed in the workforce? All right. There is a lot of Business Week, Fortune, Forbes, CNN, knee-jerk reaction, pop psychology that would agree with you here. All right. Who knows? In the future, maybe the social skills we need are not the social skills that we're doing here via video, but they could be another set that you're cultivating digitally. I personally believe that interpersonal communication skills is the number one soft skill you should have. I really do. So, I'm not a doomsayer here, and I've only seen pop psychology here and not hard research. So, I'm tough to say yes. I feel weird agreeing with the pop psychology narrative out there. All right. Which component of EI do you value most? Okay, so this is how I'm going to answer this question. Okay, first of all, you need all 5, which he reduced to 4, EI traits to be high in EI. Okay, it's almost like, okay, which internal organ don't you need to function as a human? Well, you need them all to function as a human. You can't take your lungs out and expect still to be able to breathe. So I don't want to favor one versus the other. Now, if there's one that I want to call attention to, I want to call attention to the empathy one. The one that has that inward focus. The one that be able to see, to have that perspective. To be able to see, if you're a leader, you can't do it all on your own. You need to be able to empower your employees, and you can empower your employees to do something if you can see it from their perspective. The first thing, and some of you are managers right now, just because you have the title and just because you send an email out doesn't mean anybody's going to do anything for you. You've all experienced this. I mean, you're working with a team right now, 3 people on a team that I assign to you. Just because you say you need to do something doesn't mean your other 2 team members does it. Same thing happens at work. Same thing happens with faculty members. Trust me. All right, Team Google. Are businesses putting an emphasis on soft skills when training management? I sure hope so. I said in the earlier question, I'm a huge fan of the soft skills. Huge fan. Networking, empathy, nonverbal communication. Huge. You want a nonverbal communication book as your book for the semester? Then find Talk Like Ted by Carmen Gallo. Very, very good one. Are people born to be leaders? Okay, answered that one. Made. Learn skill. Okay, Team Cook. Cook is a Y, by the way, but he's not an extreme Y. Is there a correlation between being an athlete and being a great leader and executive? No, there is not. Sure, there are some athletes that happen to be strong leaders, but there are just as many leaders who have nothing to do with athletes. Sure, we can find examples here, but there's not a strong correlation here. And let me throw this one to you, okay? Why are there so few Hall of Fame athletes coaches? How come Jordan is a coach? If you notice in baseball, right? If you look at the best managers, they were not very good players. Find me a manager in baseball who's in the Hall of Fame as a player. Find me a Hall of Fame NFL player who's now a manager. It's very, very difficult to do. Because many times, those managers who are Hall of Fame players have a hard time doing the empathy thing because they were the best of the best of the best. By the way, your exception is Larry Bird. He's one of the few exceptions that I can come up in sport. Soccer, there tends to be more. Look at Zinedine Zidane. Okay, probably one of the top 11, definitely one of the top 24, perhaps one of the top 11 players ever to play the game. And, he took Real Madrid to 3 consecutive Champions League finals, okay? Yeah, that's saying something. But, wow, it's tough to do. In my company, and I know there's been studies about military. Well, military is different than college athletics. Now, when we were talking about athletes, I was talking about pro sports. College athletics is a different thing because college athletics, many of them don't go pro, and the balancing the sport and the grades and all that, that's different, What do you think is the best driver? What makes an athlete a great leader of a corporate executive? I already said that I don't see there's a correlation here. Because I know just as many people that have that drive to be a great leader that were not an athlete, and the drive came from somewhere else, and not just sports. I don't want to equate success and failure the way you equate win and losses with sports. Because in sports, you win or you don't win. Okay? And when you don't win, you tend to not die, or people don't lose their jobs, or you don't lose your job. It's a way to practice without it being life and death. The problem with corporations, it could be life or death. It could be a bet the firm kind of strategy. Which of the 5 factors are important? I already answered this question. If a manager doesn't have all 5, maybe only 2 or 3 out of 5, can they still be considered to have a good EQ? They can be more EQ than not. I'm going to tell you right now, I have all 4, but my all 4 are not the same level. I mean, they're good, but... Are there any good leadership classes available for corporations and businesses? Yes. What would be the pros and cons of taking advantage of such classes? Well, let's just say you had Goldman come into the company, Think about it this way. Think about what we've been studying so far this semester, right? You're in a bottom-up world. You need to be more CRM. Well, if you need to be more CRM, guess what? You need to be more empathetic because you got to listen. You don't want to sit there and just spam everybody just because you have the database, just because you have the data. You want to be helpful. In order to be helpful, you got to listen. You got to be empathetic. So it's not just leadership classes. Think about emotional intelligence classes. And if you're more emotional intelligence, it's easier to deal with a crowd, or it's easier to be empathetic and learn from a crowd. Personally, I think the bottom-up world is shifting us away from X and more towards Y. And if you listen to the recording, if you go further in the last video and you go back and listen to the recording and you see all the PowerPoint slides, I make that case quite effectively. All right, Team Amazon, which is much more X than Y. There are different styles of leadership, but surely a certain trait has to be the most destructive to one's leadership ability. Now, this is the opposite question. Instead of which is the best, which is the worst. And I can make the same argument that there are multiple things that could be worse. And there are multiple things that would be destructive to me, but not destructive to you. And I don't want to say there's one worse leadership trait, but leaders that don't listen are just screwed. They're totally screwed. How can you lead when you can't hear what's going on around you? Just because you're a leader doesn't mean anyone's going to listen to you. What Fortune 500 company has the best leadership in terms of the CEO being hands-on with the employees and not hiding behind doors, in your opinion? Well, go to the best places to work article. I mean, my gosh. Verizon CEO can be seen in the gym with normal everyday employees around him. But I'm telling you right now, I know a lot of people at Verizon. That is a very Theory X kind of an organization, especially the higher you go up the food chain there. Oh boy. I've had a lot of MBAs over the years. I have good friends that are former and current executives at Verizon. Verizon is more of an X organization, definitely, than Y. I can say that. You know, it's easy for me. I could cherry pick a company. If you want me to cherry pick a company, look at Zappos. Zappos is a perfect case study in why in a company that is thriving. Tony Hesh, but it's spelled weird. All right. The article mentions maturity and life expectancy go hand in hand with emotional intelligence. Perhaps. What can be done to develop or hone skills, soft skills, emotional intelligence in younger workers who lack the maturity and life experience? Well, this is leadership development. Put them in situations that demand the emotional intelligence. Give them projects at work that they need emotional intelligence in order to get the project through. As a manager and a leader, are there any way to help develop amongst team members? I mean, this is the video of finding books. I don't see it handy. It's called Thanks for the Feedback. 2 Harvard professors. If you want a book that makes you listen more, that will make you more empathetic, that is the leadership book to do that. Thanks for the Feedback. It's really, really, really good. Sheenaheen and Douglas something. I wonder if I lent it to someone. Oh gosh. It's right in front of my eyeballs. And guess what book was right next to it? Emotional Intelligence, Daniel Goleman, and next to it, Thanks for the Feedback, Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen. I would read this one. You already read the Harvard Business Review article for this one. You don't need to read this book. You already read the article. This one, read this book. Okay. What programs that use the limbic system actually help change behavior? Okay. Excuse me for not knowing my neurology, but I think I kind of hinted at various things that will make you happy for this particular question. How will wider adoption of policies around diversity and inclusion contribute to management philosophies as we move forward to the 21st century? Do you foresee any new resulting management styles due to this movement? Well, I will tell you right now that the more why, the more empathy, the easier for diversity and inclusion and empowering employees and seeing more CEO female executives, more minority executives in the leadership team. It's the Theory X hierarchical firms where it's very difficult to break those glass ceilings. See what I mean? And if we go back to the companies where we saw female and minority CEOs thrive, they tend to be significantly more Y than X. And if you look at Microsoft right now, we have Satya Nadella here. He is definitely more Y than X. We have Ginny at IBM, and she is definitely more Y than X. Coaching and mentoring have been proven to help in... look, did we already do Hastings? We haven't done Hastings. This is Hastings. Oh, look. Hastings. Google senior executive from Netflix fired over the weekend because he dropped the N-word way too many times. This is a Theory Y guy in a Theory Y firm, and someone was trying to be way too cool and wasn't being sensitive, was tone deaf. And this very, very high up the food chain white dude got fired. He earned it. The firing, that is. If coaching, mentoring have been proven to help decrease turnover and increase job satisfaction, why don't more companies implement this as a policy? Is the loss of resources during a mentoring or coaching session that much greater than the loss of an unhappy employee? I know for a fact that the loss of an unhappy employee is way, way, way more expensive than it is to put the time and effort into a coaching session or mentoring. You have the cost of replacing the employee. You have the cost of decreased efficiency of the new employee ramping on. You have the cost of acquiring the new employee. The costs of a new employee are way, way, way higher than it is for training and mentoring. But some companies, tunnel vision, short-term vision, not long-term vision, they don't get it. All right. The first two articles go very, very hand in hand. They're both theory articles. Okay? EI, low candor. This is an application article. And, very good article. It very much plays to the culture of Google. You have two guys who founded this company that are extreme X's. They don't like management. They don't like making decisions at all. They're geeks, man. They like staring at a screen and letting the data make all the decisions for them. All right. Team IBM. How can managers leverage vague survey answers to make impactful changes to daily lives of employees? Okay. If you have large numbers, they're not vague. Even if some people omit data, if you have enough data, if you have a lot of data, you can do lots and lots of analysis. And the vagueness could be a function of the question itself. If you have good questions, look at the effort, the one number you need to know article. Because basically, what Google did was try to find the 3 or 4 or 5 questions that manage that statistically have the most impact on management. The same way Reichheld tried to find the 1, 2, or 3 questions that made the most for loyalty, and it turned out to be just one question. Google ended up doing all the people ops research in this project to say, something, these 3 or 4 questions are the magic questions. How can a manager make sure the efficiency while pursuing high scores of upward feedback and tech managers? How to balance efficiency and employee satisfaction? Well, how do managers make sure efficiency while pursuing both high scores of upward? Do a good job. Be technically competent and do a good job. You saw the 8 questions in that article. Now, 7 of those 8 of the most significant that were in the spine in the middle of the Google article, only the last one, being technically competent, was something that was probably specific to Google. The other 7 could have fit anywhere, meaning be important for any other company. How do you balance efficiency versus employee satisfaction? You do your best, I keep going back to empathy, but the workers have to do the work. You're the manager. You're the boss. So empower them to do the work. Listen to how you can help them do the work better. And be technically competent. It was a very good article. That's why I included it. Okay, this executive that they hired wanted Google to be hypothesis-driven and solve company problems, because this is the way Google culturally was. Although this method was proven to be somewhat successful, it could be also viewed as almost robotic and dehumanizing. Well, that's what Google is, robotic and dehumanizing, by the fact that well-being employees can be determined by an algorithm. Google believes the whole world can be determined by an algorithm. This is the company that wants to take all books and digitize the world. This is the company that wants to take driving out of cars. This is the company that can tell you what's the most popular thing that people are searching for on the web. Everything's an algorithm. Google will tell you that this was a very successful, not somewhat successful project. By reading the process on which they selected managers and those managers who scored a higher rating, do you think it would be almost better to hire someone with some sort of psychological background or possibly a career coach? Well, I think people ops should hire someone with a more psychological background and career coaches. But according to Google, they want someone who's technologically competent first, and not someone who has a strong psychological background who technically could not keep up with the employees there. You can train the psychology or the leadership to someone who's technologically an engineer who's very competent. I mean, think about it. You're an MBA, you probably went to an undergraduate business school, you're working in a business, so you've had some training whether you liked it or not. But when these tech companies, they're coming out of an engineering school with little to no business background at all. They could go to the engineering school and come out with not even having one management course. Not one. There is no organizational behavior course. There is no consumer behavior course. There is no capstone management course. It's challenging. All right, CEO of Google asking questions about a Google article. At what point should a company switch from a flat to a hierarchical organization? I'd say when there's a major meltdown, when there's a financial crisis, when you go Chapter 11, when you are in an existential crisis. Otherwise, I would stay away from hierarchical as much as I possibly could. Can a data processing tool narrow down high-quality employees without the help of a human to oversee the qualifications in a resume? Oh, they're trying. There are a number of companies out there. ZipRecruiter. Oh boy. There is all kinds of research going on about this right now. All kinds of research going on right about that. Look at StrengthsFinder. StrengthsFinder is something exactly like that. All right, we have a couple more. Last set of questions here. I wonder how effective something as Project Oxygen would have been on a smaller company setting, one without as many data points to analyze and compare. Well, as I said earlier, these types of data projects do require multiple data points to do the analysis. Once you get into smaller numbers, you get into higher error. It's harder to do the statistics when there isn't enough data to do the statistics. You can philosophically do something like Project Oxygen without having to go so deep into the surveys. Because you're smaller, because you're flatter, you don't have to do it as much. I know how Project Oxygen accounted for different management types. I would like to know how it accounted for different management types. Over the years, I've taken a number of leadership development courses, and each focuses on developing your own leadership style. And there are a multitude of them. And as a matter of fact, the earlier articles talked about a multitude of them. In a general sense, the points that Project Oxygen raised make sense. However, I'd like to see some data in regard to how manager leader style evolved pre and post Oxygen. Well, there was very little in the article that talked about managers who didn't respond to the data being given to them. That's what I would like to see. So, in other words, they have some behavior before getting surveyed. Project Oxygen then gave them a bunch of data, and did that manager change over time? We didn't see that in the article. I mean, I know other leadership articles that I've read that you get fired if you don't change. If someone gives you, if you are getting paid that much money and feedback is coming your way and you ignore the feedback, and then over another cycle you ignore the feedback, and over another cycle ignore the feedback, let's ignore the fact that you're not doing anything unethical, okay, like Me Too. Let's ignore that, because let's assume that that's not happening. But let's say you are an ethical manager, yet you're ignoring the feedback. Well, guess what? You're not going to be able to keep your job. You're not going to be able to keep your job. You will get moved out. You'll either get fired or you'll get moved to somewhere non-strategic. Would the lack of corporate funding be the biggest setback from doing a similar project opportunity? It's not just the funding, it's the support from the top. Because if People Ops did Project Oxygen without having senior management endorse it, that's just as big of a problem as the lack of corporate funding. I feel like every company would benefit by doing a similar project. I would agree. All right, Team Microsoft. This is a very specialized approach to improving management. Maybe it's a very specialized process, but the approach is extremely similar by a lot of companies. Do you think this model will work well in smaller firms? I think I already got to this question, but it just doesn't have to be as formal for a smaller firm. Would Project Oxygen also be the solution to how to separate manager qualifications from manager characteristics? Do you think there's a blurred line between the two, qualifications and characteristics? Wow, that's a good question. The thing is I don't think you get to be in that position without having the qualifications to get you there first. I don't think you could be in the certain divisions managing certain employees unless you already had certain qualifications. And then once you're there, can Oxygen help you become a better manager? That's a pretty good question. Have these adjustments affected Google today, and have other companies followed Google's lead to invest in management? Yes and yes. Google got too big that they couldn't ignore management any longer. To the point where even though Page is the CEO, he's more the CEO in name. He has a lot of really good people around him that do a lot of work. Zuckerberg is the CEO in name, and he makes final decisions. But, Sheryl Sandberg runs that company. You know that. You think as Zuckerberg and Page of more as visionaries. Set the strategic, but the day-to-day operations Page does not do as a CEO. And Zuckerberg does not do as a CEO. All right, let me pause there for a second. Pause. Okay. Let's go to our final set of questions here. I understand that Google is a special place with very intelligent people. The article refers to the employees as A players. Unfortunately, not all organizations have this caliber of employee. And you know something? That's a good thing. There's been a lot of articles, particularly in Harvard Business Review. Gina Gallo is the professor at Harvard. And companies that have all A players, they actually don't work as well as companies that have a mixture of A, B's, and C's. Too many A players is very, very messy. They don't work together. They don't work well together. There's too many alpha dogs. It doesn't work. Think about sports teams. Think about teams of all A players, and many, many, many times it doesn't really work out all that well. So I think the A player narrative is oversold. based on the literature that's starting to come out now, the A player narrative is oversold. Do you believe this management program is something that should be universally used? Not necessarily this one, because this process was for Google, because Google is an analytical company, and this is, Google needed to go through this process. Otherwise, it's the same process they do with all their other decisions. So all they did was follow the same process. If they want to improve search, this is what they do. I mean, they literally make 3 to 4 changes to the search algorithm every day. Search is 90% of their revenue. It's the most important thing that Google does. Okay? But if they wanted something important like management to be important, they had to treat it the same process-wise that they treated search, i.e. through data. Now, I think that people ops or human resources should be an integral and a central part of employee and manager training. Whether you go and do the survey stuff the way Google did is another story, but it's what worked for Google. I don't think all organizations have to do the survey thing. Should it be replicated at other organizations where have different motivations? That really depends. If you take the process that Google did to an organization that does not value algorithmic hypothesis A/B testing, then it might not be as impactful. Without having employee feedback like Google, how can we attempt to self-reflect as managers in our own company and work on Google's 8 pillars of management? Without having employee feedback like Google, how can we attempt to self-reflect as managers in our own company and work on Google's? Well, just steal them. You have a journal. You have takeaways. Don't spend the time and effort that Google did. Just steal their 8 pillars of management. And maybe these all 8 won't work for you or for your organization. But if you borrow the 8 from Google, I already took the Amazon book away, and you took 2 nuggets from Amazon, you take 1 nugget from this book, you take 1 nugget from The Signal and the Noise from Nate Silver, and then you take Jeff Jarvis's, this is the book that tells you how Google works, and then steal some stuff from Vaynerchuk when we go along. And guess what? What else we can do here? Oh, Chris Anderson, The Long Tail. Here's another really good one. You're creating your own strategy notebook. That's the whole point of the journal. Do it. Beg, borrow, steal, but ultimately pick what you think is best for you and your situation. Yes? The company-issued surveys can inherently have reasons to be more withholding in your commentary, even if advertised as anonymous. Perhaps, yet the unfiltered responses may yield the most valuable information. Perhaps. Consider this. How can a company produce valuable insights from internal surveys? Use a third party. Use an intermediary. Bring the professor in to do the analysis, so the stories come back through the professor or through the research firm as opposed to through HR. I hate to say it. You can withhold information. You can not be fully forthright. But you're hurting yourself and you're hurting the company. So it's a tough line to walk, Do I say this because they know it's going to be coming from me, but at the same time, this is what I really want to say, and it's probably going to mean I'm not going to get promoted. So what do you do? Hopefully there can be a filter there, like a professor or a third party or some other kind of scenario. Google seems to always lead the way when it comes to new technology products and services. They are a leading company. They don't always seem to lead the way. But they are very good. With such success as Project Oxygen, how can they help lead the way for their organization to take notice of their feedback and management cycle to implement? I don't know. I think they did pretty far by letting a bunch of researchers come in and document the process and us being able to hear this story in Harvard Business Review. I mean, there's probably only a couple of companies I can name on my two hands that let us see the inside of the company and not us be an employee. Right? I'm glad we have this article. All right, Team Amazon, Professor Bezos. Are there currently any large companies having success using a flat organization? Yes. As I mentioned earlier, Zappos, owned by Bezos, is a very flat organization. Facebook is a really flat organization considering their size, relatively speaking. Apple is very flat up top. They're very flat up top. Gosh. Look for Theory Y, look for Tech, look for California. You get flatter. You get more Y. Google, obviously, if you want to stay away from flat, you want to go more hierarchical, go to New York, go to the finance industry, go to the pharmaceutical industry, go to the medical industry, medical technology industry, go to anything government. Oh boy. Google obviously has the means to pay for something like Oxygen. Is it realistic for other companies to use a similar technique if they don't have a large budget? I kind of already answered this question. And you don't need to do exactly what Google did to follow that process and get results like that. I mean, Strength Finder is a step in the right direction. Strength Finder is better than doing nothing, right? Have HR do Strength Finder. Some of you who have been through the launch experience with me, I didn't even see your results. I'm not even an HR person, and I was able to say, oh, yeah, you're probably in sales, oh, you're probably in customer service, or you're probably here, based just on the 5. Can you imagine if we saw a much deeper analysis and not only the 5, but your next 10 after that? Okay, thank you very much. This was a great topic. I love leadership. You will see how it becomes a central part of this bottom-up conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Stop recording.